Merrick's heart raced as the small transport ship touched down on the barren planet. The planet was nothing more than a dry wasteland, its surface cracked and split like old leather. A harsh wind howled across the dusty terrain, stirring up little clouds of sand that whipped against the ship's metal hull. His fingers tightened around the controls, and he adjusted his visor to block out the stinging dust. The planet, though desolate, had one thing that drew Merrick in. A signal, faint but unmistakable, coming from somewhere on the surface. Merrick wasn't one to ignore a call for help, even if it meant venturing into the unknown. He'd traveled to many planets, met many species, but something about this signal felt different. It didn't sound like a distress beacon from any ship he'd encountered before. It was coded, a strange pattern that hummed deep in his chest. He had to find its source. The ship's thrusters powered down with a low hum as Merrick touched down. The dust around him settled, but the silence of the planet was unnerving. There were no sounds of wildlife, no movement. It was as if the world itself had died. Merrick grabbed his backpack and rifle, securing both before exiting the ship. His boots crunched on the dry earth as he moved forward, scanning the horizon. The signal had led him to a jagged mountain range in the distance. As he approached, he saw it, an old battered spacecraft, half buried in the dirt. Its metallic surface was scorched, and the engines were dark. It had clearly crash-landed, and from the looks of it, it hadn't been here long. Merrick cautiously approached the wreckage, every step measured. The signal was stronger now, more urgent. He rounded the side of the ship, and that's when he saw her. A woman. She lay on the ground, her body sprawled awkwardly, her chest rising and falling in shallow breaths. Her skin was a pale green, almost translucent, and her hair shimmered like silver strands of light. Her alien features were delicate, but there was a certain strength in her form. She was injured, badly, with blood seeping from a deep gash along her side. Her eyes flickered open as Merrick knelt beside her. "Help," she whispered, her voice a soft tremor, almost lost in the wind. Her alien tongue was different from any language Merrick had heard, but the meaning was clear. She needed help. Merrick's mind raced. He wasn't a doctor, but he had enough training to know how to stabilize someone in an emergency. He quickly assessed her injuries. She wasn't bleeding out, but the wound needed attention. He tore a strip of cloth from his jacket and pressed it against the gash, trying to stop the bleeding. She winced but didn't make a sound. Her eyes were full of fear, but also trust. "Don't worry," Merrick said, his voice calm. "I'll get you help." He worked quickly, setting up a small medical pack he always carried for emergencies like this. It wasn't much, but it was enough to patch her up for now. As he worked, the woman's eyes never left him. Her gaze was intense, as though she were studying him, trying to understand him. She spoke again, this time in a language that Merrick didn't recognize, but he could hear the gratitude in her tone. Merrick smiled lightly. "You're safe now. Just hang on. I'll get you back to my ship." The woman's lips parted slightly, and she nodded weakly. Her hand reached up, gripping Merrick's arm. "Thank you," she said in broken words, her voice barely a whisper. Her hand fell limp, but Merrick could see the faintest glimmer of tears in her eyes. He lifted her carefully, his strength surprising him as he carried her toward his ship. The walk back was long, the weight of her body dragging at him, but he refused to let her down. She had trusted him. He wasn't about to let her die out here. Once inside the ship, Merrick laid her down gently in the small medical bay. He started the healing process, activating the ship's medical system to administer a series of injections. The technology wasn't designed for aliens, but it was the best he had. He worked quickly, using what little equipment he had to stabilize her condition. The ship's interior hummed softly, and Merrick found himself sitting beside the woman, watching her closely. The medical systems were working, but it would take time for her to fully recover. As he waited, he found himself wondering who she was. What race was she from? What had happened to her ship? The woman stirred, and Merrick's attention snapped back to her. Her eyes fluttered open, and she looked at him with confusion. She blinked a few times before speaking, this time in clear, simple words. "Human," she said, her voice still weak but more steady now. "You saved me. I will repay you." Merrick blinked, surprised by the sudden clarity in her words. "Repay me?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" Her gaze softened, and she smiled, a faint curve of her lips. "I owe you my life. I will repay you for saving me." Merrick felt a strange chill run down his spine. There was something in her eyes, something he couldn't quite place. But for now, he didn't care. She was alive. That was all that mattered. "Don't worry about it," Merrick said, trying to brush off the unease he felt. "You just focus on getting better." But as he spoke those words, Merrick couldn't shake the feeling that this was the beginning of something much larger than a simple rescue, something that might change everything. Days passed, and the silence of the ship became almost comfortable for Merrick. The injured alien woman, whom he now knew was called Lyra, had slowly regained her strength. Her alien features, delicate and almost ethereal, seemed to glow in the dim light of the ship's medical bay. Merrick had found himself checking on her more often than he expected, a feeling of protectiveness growing each time. He wasn't sure if it was because she was vulnerable or if something more was pulling him in. Lyra was different from any other alien Merrick had met in his travels. She was intelligent, quick to learn and adapt, and incredibly curious about Earth. She asked endless questions about humans, their history, their culture, and their technology. Merrick was happy to answer most of them, though some of her questions were so strange and unexpected that he struggled to find the right words. But what surprised him the most were her gifts. As Lyra's condition improved, she insisted on returning the favor for Merrick's kindness. At first, he refused, unsure of what kind of repayment she was referring to. But Lyra wasn't easily discouraged. She had a look of determination in her eyes, and though Merrick felt it was unnecessary, he agreed to listen to her. One evening, as Merrick sat in the cockpit of his ship, trying to adjust the navigational systems, Lyra appeared behind him. She was holding something in her hands, a small metallic object that shimmered in the light. "I've brought you a gift," she said, her voice soft, but filled with sincerity. Merrick turned around, curious. "A gift?" he asked, raising an eyebrow. "Yes," she said with a smile. "It's not much, but it is a token of my gratitude." Lyra handed him the object. It was small, no bigger than the palm of his hand, and had a smooth surface that seemed to change color with every movement. Merrick turned it over in his hands, feeling its weight. It was unlike anything he had ever seen before. "What is it?" he asked, still turning the object over. Lyra's smile deepened. "It's a piece of my people's technology. It can enhance your ship's systems, boost its power, and make it more efficient. It's a gift from my race, a way to show my thanks." Merrick's eyes widened. This is advanced technology. Are you sure this is safe? I don't know what kind of systems this would work with." Lyra nodded. "It is perfectly safe. I've made sure of it. It is a simple upgrade, but one that will make your ship stronger and faster. You will see the difference." Though Merrick hesitated, he couldn't deny the intrigue. He had seen advanced technology before, but nothing like this. He had no reason to distrust Lyra, but something about her offer still felt too good to be true. He had learned, through years of exploration, that nothing came without a cost. But he had saved her life. Perhaps this was her way of returning the favor, even if it seemed odd. "All right," Merrick said, setting the object on a nearby table. "I'll install it. Let's see what it can do." The installation was surprisingly easy. Lyra guided him through the process, her words steady and confident. As Merrick followed her instructions, he couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the efficiency of the technology. It was like nothing he had ever worked with before. Within a few minutes, the upgrade was complete. Merrick ran a few tests on the ship's systems. He checked the engines, the shields, and the energy reserves. The results were immediate. The ship's systems hummed with a power he hadn't thought possible. The engines were faster, the shields stronger, and the energy reserves had increased by over 50%. "This is incredible," Merrick said, his voice filled with amazement. "I've never seen anything like it." Lyra stood beside him, her face glowing with satisfaction. "I'm glad you like it. I told you it would work. My people have advanced technology that can change the course of entire battles, and now you have access to it." Merrick's thoughts raced. He was a space explorer, but he wasn't a soldier. He had never been in a true battle before. He had faced danger on planets, dealt with hostile creatures, and navigated through asteroid fields, but war was something he had avoided. Yet, as he looked at Lyra, something stirred inside him. She spoke of her people, of their technology, and of how it could be used to change the galaxy. The promise of such power was tempting, but Merrick knew he had to be careful. The galaxy was full of unknowns, and trust was a fragile thing. He had to wonder, why had Lyra chosen to share this technology with him? Did she really just want to repay him, or was there something more to this gift? As the days passed, Lyra continued to share more with him. She gave him blueprints for advanced weaponry, information about her people's star maps, and even taught him some of their language. Each gift was a small piece of a puzzle, and Merrick found himself drawn deeper into it. "I've told you a little about my people," Lyra said one evening, her voice serious. "But there is much more you need to understand. We are a peaceful race, but we are fighting a war. An ancient war against an empire that threatens everything we stand for." Merrick listened, intrigued but wary. "And what does that have to do with me?" Lyra turned to face him, her eyes earnest. "I need your help. My people cannot win this war alone. But with your technology and your knowledge, we might stand a chance." Merrick's mind raced. He had never intended to get involved in a war, but the more Lyra spoke, the more he realized that her cause might be just. Still, something about the way she spoke, so confident, so certain, made him hesitate. "I'm not a soldier," Merrick said slowly. "I'm just a traveler. I don't want to get caught up in something like this." Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder, her eyes softening. "You don't have to be a soldier, Merrick. You're already helping. And your knowledge, your ship, will make all the difference." Merrick didn't know what to think. He had saved her life, but now it seemed as if she was asking for something more. Was he ready to get involved in a war that he didn't fully understand? The days on the ship were growing more complicated. Merrick had learned to trust Lyra in many ways, but as time passed, he felt something strange in the air. The more she shared about her people and their war, the more questions arose in Merrick's mind. He had helped her, given her shelter, and even trusted her with his ship's systems. But Lyra's words seemed to hide more than they revealed, and Merrick couldn't ignore the growing feeling that there was something she wasn't telling him. It was a quiet evening when the first sign of something unusual appeared. Merrick was going over the ship's data logs, reviewing the recent system updates, when he noticed a strange blip in the navigation charts. It was a small anomaly, barely noticeable, but it repeated every few hours in the same spot. An area on the outer edge of the galaxy that Merrick knew was home to no known planets or colonies. He frowned, making a note of it. It was a detail that seemed unimportant at first, but something about it felt wrong. Merrick had always trusted his instincts. As a space explorer, they had kept him safe many times, and right now, his instincts were telling him to dig deeper. "Lyra," Merrick called, stepping into the living area of the ship where she was sitting, reading one of his human texts. She looked up, smiling faintly. "Yes, Merrick," she asked, setting the book aside. "I noticed something strange," he said, walking toward her. "There's an anomaly in the navigation system. It repeats in the same location, just beyond the known star charts. Do you know anything about it?" Lyra's eyes flickered for a brief moment. She masked it quickly with a calm expression, but Merrick noticed. She knew more than she was letting on. "That's odd," Lyra said, her voice smooth. It's probably just an interference or a glitch. Sometimes the sensors pick up stray signals from deep space. It's nothing to worry about. Merrick didn't believe her. He had been a navigator long enough to know the difference between interference and something deliberate. "Are you sure?" he asked, narrowing his eyes. "It's not like any glitch I've seen before. It's too regular." Lyra stood up, walking over to the control panel beside him. She ran her fingers over the screen, but her movements seemed distracted. Merrick's suspicion grew. She was hiding something, and he wasn't sure if he wanted to know what it was. "Maybe I missed something," Lyra said, her tone friendly, but a little too forced. "I'll take a look later." Before Merrick could respond, the ship's alarms suddenly blared, cutting through the tension. Lyra's expression shifted instantly, her eyes widening with alarm. She rushed to the control panel, her fingers moving quickly over the console. "What is it?" Merrick asked, his heart racing. "What's happening?" "The anomaly," Lyra said, her voice now sharp. "It's not a glitch. Someone is tracking us." Merrick froze, his blood running cold. "What do you mean? Who is tracking us?" Lyra hesitated, glancing at him. For a moment, Merrick could see fear in her eyes, something he had never seen before. The calm, confident woman he had come to know seemed to falter. "It's the Empire," she whispered, almost to herself. Merrick felt his stomach tighten. He had heard stories of the Empire, the ruthless, war-hungry faction that had conquered dozens of worlds. He had always thought the stories were exaggerated, but now, with Lyra's words hanging in the air, he realized the truth. Lyra wasn't just a peaceful refugee. She was connected to this empire. He had known something was off, but now it was clear. "Lyra," Merrick began, his voice low with disbelief. "You're not who you said you were, are you?" Lyra turned to face him, her expression hardening. "No," she said, her voice steady. "I am not. But I never lied to you. I told you about my people's war. I just didn't tell you the whole truth." Merrick shook his head. He couldn't believe it. She had carefully crafted every word, every story, making him believe that she was someone she wasn't. He had trusted her, helped her, and now he felt like a fool. "Why didn't you tell me?" Merrick demanded, his voice rising. "Why did you bring me into this? You used me, didn't you? All of it. The technology, the upgrades, everything. It was all just part of your plan." Lyra's eyes softened, but the hardness in her gaze remained. "You don't understand. My people are fighting for survival. We are not the monsters you think we are. The Empire forces us to do things we do not want to do. I had no choice but to ask for your help." Merrick's anger burned brighter. "And the technology? The weapon you promised me? Was that part of your plan too?" Lyra's silence was enough of an answer. Merrick's worst fears had been true. Everything she had given him, everything she had done, had been to manipulate him into helping her cause. But there was something else, something in her eyes that made Merrick pause. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said quietly. "But the Empire is hunting us. We have no choice. I thought if I could gain your trust, I could stop them. I never wanted this to happen." Merrick stood there for a long moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He wanted to be angry, wanted to shout at her for deceiving him, but there was something else, something deeper. He could see the conflict in her eyes, the pain of someone caught between two worlds, unable to escape. "So what now?" Merrick asked, his voice flat. Lyra's gaze hardened again, and she turned back to the control panel. "Now we prepare. The Empire won't stop hunting me. But I'm not running anymore. I'm fighting back." Merrick didn't know what to say. He had trusted her, but now everything had changed. The woman who had seemed so kind, so grateful, was now a fugitive, fighting a war she had never fully explained. He didn't know what her true motives were anymore, or if he could trust her at all. But one thing was certain: nothing would ever be the same again. The air inside the ship felt thick with tension. Merrick stood by the control panel, his mind racing. Lyra had been silent for a long time, her fingers running over the ship's controls as she prepared for whatever was coming. Merrick could feel his heart pounding in his chest, and his thoughts were a whirlwind of confusion and anger. He had helped her, trusted her, and now it seemed everything he had done was part of a plan he didn't fully understand. "Lyra," Merrick finally said, his voice low, "why didn't you tell me the truth from the beginning?" She didn't look at him as she worked. "I didn't want to lie to you," she said softly. "But if I had told you everything, you wouldn't have helped me. You wouldn't have trusted me." Merrick shook his head. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore. You used me to get what you wanted, didn't you?" Lyra stopped what she was doing and turned to face him. Her eyes were serious, but there was a sadness in them too. "I didn't use you, Merrick. I never wanted to. I had no choice. The Empire is coming for me, and I needed your help to survive. I never wanted to hurt you, but now they're coming for both of us." Merrick didn't know what to believe. He wanted to be angry, to yell at her for deceiving him, but a part of him understood. She had been running from something much bigger than either of them. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had been dragged into something dangerous, something he didn't fully understand. "I didn't sign up for this," Merrick said, his voice tense. "I just wanted to explore the galaxy, not get caught up in some war." "I know," Lyra said, her voice softer now. "I never asked you to join the fight. But I need your help. The Empire is relentless. They won't stop until they find me." Before Merrick could respond, the ship's warning system blared. His eyes shot to the screen, and his heart skipped a beat. Several large ships were closing in on their position. They were the unmistakable silhouette of Empire cruisers, their sharp, angular designs unmistakable. The Empire was here. "It's them," Lyra said, her voice tight with fear. "They found us." Merrick didn't waste any time. His hands moved quickly over the controls, trying to put as much distance between them and the incoming cruisers as possible. The engines roared to life, and the ship began to accelerate. But the Empire ships were faster. They were closing in on them with terrifying speed. "Merrick, we need to do something," Lyra said, her voice urgent. "We can't outrun them. They'll destroy us if we try." Merrick's mind raced. He had been in tight situations before, but this was different. The Empire wasn't just any enemy. They were ruthless and powerful. He knew they had the resources to track him down, no matter where he went. "What do we do?" Merrick asked, his voice strained. Lyra's eyes flickered with determination. "We fight back." Merrick glanced at her, disbelief in his eyes. "Fight back? How?" Lyra's gaze didn't waver. "I've been preparing for this. I have weapons hidden on the ship, advanced technology from my people. We can use them to defend ourselves." Merrick didn't hesitate. He trusted her, despite the lies, and he knew they didn't have any other choice. He nodded, his hands already moving to the hidden compartments that Lyra had told him about. He found the weapons, sleek, advanced devices unlike anything he had ever seen. He didn't know how to use them, but Lyra was quick to explain. "Set them to stun," she said quickly. "We need to disable their ships, not destroy them. We don't want to escalate this any further." Merrick set the weapons to stun, his mind racing. "I hope this works," he muttered. The Empire ships were now just moments away, their dark shapes looming in the distance. Merrick could see their weapons charging, ready to fire. He swallowed hard, taking a deep breath. He aimed one of the weapons out of the ship's side, targeting the nearest Empire cruiser. With a press of a button, a bright pulse of energy shot from the ship, striking the cruiser with a powerful jolt. The Empire cruiser's shields flickered, but they held. Merrick gritted his teeth and fired again. This time, the ship staggered, its shields weakened. Lyra was working quickly beside him, targeting other cruisers and using the ship's advanced systems to dodge their incoming fire. The battle felt like it lasted forever. Every second was filled with the hum of weapons, the crackle of shields, and the roar of engines. Merrick could feel the heat from the blasts, the tension of being hunted, but something inside him shifted. He wasn't just running away anymore. He was fighting back, and in that moment, he realized he wasn't just helping Lyra. He was fighting for his own survival. The Empire ships were strong, but they weren't invincible. With each blast, Merrick could see the damage accumulating. The shields of the cruisers were weakening. He took another shot, and this time, the ship's weapons systems malfunctioned, sending out a burst of sparks. The cruiser's engines faltered, and it began to drift out of formation. "We've got one down," Merrick said, a small sense of victory filling him. But Lyra's face remained tense. "It's not over," she said. "There's still more coming." Merrick's heart sank as the rest of the Empire fleet closed in. The odds were against them, and he could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on him. They couldn't win this fight alone. They needed help, but there was no one to call. Then, without warning, another ship appeared on the edge of the system. It was another cruiser, but this one was different. It was sleek, fast, and clearly not of the Empire. Merrick's heart skipped a beat. "This is it," Lyra said, a mixture of relief and fear in her voice. "They've come for us." The new ship sent a blast toward the Empire ships, hitting one of the cruisers square in the shields. The Empire ships turned to face the new threat, and for a moment, the pressure eased. Merrick didn't know who the new ship was, but it was a welcome sight. They had a chance, but only for as long as they could hold off the Empire. Lyra turned to Merrick, her face serious. "We're not out of danger yet, but now we have allies." Merrick's eyes narrowed. "Who are they?" Lyra looked at him, her expression unreadable. "They're on our side. But that's a story for another time." The sudden appearance of the new ship had shifted the odds in their favor. Merrick's heart raced as he watched the new cruiser engage the Empire ships, sending out powerful blasts that hit with pinpoint accuracy. The Empire cruisers began to scatter, temporarily abandoning their pursuit of Merrick's ship in favor of this new threat. For a brief moment, Merrick felt a sense of relief, but it was fleeting. "Who are they?" Merrick asked, his voice filled with curiosity and caution. Lyra stood beside him, her eyes fixed on the battle unfolding outside the ship's windows. Her face was unreadable. "They're part of a group I've been in contact with," she said, her tone soft but serious. "They're my allies." Merrick frowned. "Allies? You didn't tell me you had allies. Why didn't you mention them earlier?" Lyra glanced at him, her expression hardening. "I didn't trust you with that information. Not until I was sure you were on my side. I couldn't risk telling you everything before." Merrick's mind raced. She had kept secrets, and now they were catching up with her. He didn't know what to think anymore. First, she had been running from the Empire. Now, she had allies. Allies who had just appeared at the perfect time. The timing was too perfect, and Merrick couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than she was letting on. "Are you sure they're on our side?" Merrick asked, his voice steady but laced with doubt. "What if they're just using you? What if they're not as trustworthy as you think?" Lyra didn't immediately answer. She turned back to the controls, her eyes scanning the battle outside. The new cruiser was keeping the Empire ships at bay, but it was clear they wouldn't hold off the Empire for long. The Empire ships were regrouping, preparing for another attack. "They're my people, Merrick," Lyra said after a long pause. "I trust them. They know what the Empire is capable of. They won't let us fall." But Merrick wasn't so sure. There was something about the way she said it, something that made him hesitate. He had learned long ago that trust was a fragile thing, and he couldn't just take her word for it. "What do we do now?" Merrick asked, his eyes still fixed on the battle outside. Lyra's expression hardened. "We need to escape. The Empire is not going to stop. They'll keep coming until they get me." Merrick nodded, already preparing for the next move. The escape plan had been the only thing on his mind since the moment the Empire had found them. But now, with Lyra's allies arriving, it seemed there was a chance, just a chance, that they could survive this. He turned to the ship's controls, his fingers moving swiftly. We can't outrun them. We need to get to the hidden sector, the one you mentioned earlier, Merrick said, his voice steady. Lyra's eyes narrowed. It's a long shot. The Empire knows about that sector, but it might be our only chance. Set course for the coordinates I gave you. Merrick punched in the coordinates, and the ship's engines roared to life. The ship lurched forward, racing toward the distant sector that could offer them temporary safety. Behind them, the battle between the new cruiser and the Empire continued to rage, each side exchanging fire as the distance between them grew. As the ship sped away, Merrick couldn't help but feel the weight of the decision on his shoulders. He had been dragged into this conflict, and now he was racing toward the unknown, unsure of who he could trust. Lyra had kept secrets from him, and he didn't know if he could believe everything she had told him. She had said she trusted her allies, but he couldn't forget the doubt that lingered in the back of his mind. He glanced at her. She was sitting in the co-pilot's seat, her face hard, her eyes locked on the screen. She looked like a woman on a mission, a woman who had seen too much and was prepared for whatever came next. Merrick couldn't help but admire her strength, but he still felt the unease gnawing at him. There was more to this story, and he needed to know the truth. We're almost there, Lyra said, breaking the silence. Once we reach the sector, we'll lay low for a while. The Empire won't find us right away. Merrick nodded, his grip tight on the controls. And then what? What's the next step? I don't want to keep running forever. Lyra hesitated. Once we're safe, we'll regroup with my allies. We have a plan to take the fight to the Empire, but we need to be careful. The Empire has eyes everywhere. Merrick's thoughts raced. A plan to fight the Empire. It was risky, dangerous, and uncertain. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that he couldn't just run forever. The Empire wasn't going to stop until they had what they wanted. And if he didn't help Lyra, she might not survive this. I'm in, Merrick said, his voice resolute. Let's do this. Lyra turned to him, a faint smile appearing on her lips. You won't regret it, Merrick. I promise. But Merrick wasn't sure. There were still so many questions, so many things he didn't know. What was Lyra's true role in this war? What were her allies really after? He didn't know, but he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't turn back now. As they neared the hidden sector, Merrick's thoughts continued to race. He wasn't sure who he could trust anymore, but he knew one thing. If they were going to survive, they would have to rely on each other. The Empire was closing in, and time was running out. But deep down, Merrick couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play, and he was just a small part of it. The hidden sector loomed ahead like a shadow, a place where Merrick and Lyra could only hope to find a temporary refuge. As the ship entered the sector's coordinates, Merrick felt a wave of uncertainty wash over him. He had no idea what they would find here, only that it was their best chance of survival. The Empire was relentless, and the battle they had fought against them was just a small taste of what lay ahead. The ship slowed as they entered the sector, the stars stretching out in every direction. This sector was isolated, far from any known colonies or trade routes. It was perfect for hiding, but also dangerous. There was no telling what dangers lurked in the quiet expanse of space. Is this the place? Merrick asked, glancing at Lyra. Lyra, her face set in a look of determination, nodded. Yes, this is the place. My allies are waiting for us. But we have to be careful. The Empire may have already sent scouts to watch this area. Merrick didn't say anything. He had heard the urgency in her voice and knew they couldn't afford to make any mistakes. They needed to stay low, keep their presence hidden, and wait for the Empire to move on. The ship coasted through the darkness, the hum of the engines the only sound breaking the silence. Lyra sat beside Merrick, her eyes scanning the empty space outside. She seemed lost in thought. her fingers resting lightly on the controls, ready for any sudden movement. Merrick couldn't help but wonder what was going through her mind. Was she thinking about her allies, or was she worried about the Empire catching up to them? "How much longer until we meet your allies?" Merrick asked, breaking the silence. Lyra glanced at him, her eyes serious. "We're almost there. They'll be waiting for us at a hidden base. It's in a nearby asteroid field. No one else knows about it, not even the Empire. It's been kept secret for years." Merrick nodded, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. He had trusted Lyra, but now, with every new piece of information, more doubts crept into his mind. How much of what she told him was true? Was this truly just a group of rebels fighting the Empire, or was there more to their cause than she was letting on? As the ship moved deeper into the sector, Merrick's thoughts turned to the Empire. They had come so close to destroying him and Lyra. But there had been something different about this battle. The Empire ships were relentless, but they were not as efficient as they should have been. It was almost as if they were holding back, waiting for something. He couldn't figure it out, but the nagging feeling of doubt wouldn't leave him. "Lyra," Merrick began, his voice steady but filled with unease. "Are you sure your allies can be trusted? Are they really on our side?" Lyra's face hardened, but her eyes softened for a moment. "I understand why you're asking. After everything that's happened, you have every right to question everything. But I trust them, Merrick. They're not just fighting for me, they're fighting for everyone. They want to take down the Empire, and they'll stop at nothing to do it." Merrick wasn't convinced. "But how can you be so sure? There's always a chance that they could turn on us, or worse, sell us out to the Empire." Lyra's gaze grew sharper, and she looked at him with intensity. "I've been working with them for a long time, Merrick. They've proven their loyalty. And right now, they're the only ones who can help us." Merrick didn't argue. He had no choice but to trust her, at least for now. But the doubts still lingered. Could they really rely on these mysterious allies, or were they walking into a trap? Minutes passed like hours as the ship approached the asteroid field. The surrounding space was dark, filled with drifting debris and floating rocks. It was the perfect place to hide, but it was also a dangerous maze that could easily confuse even the most experienced navigators. "All right, we're here," Lyra said, her voice calm but filled with urgency. "I'll signal them to open the base's entrance." Merrick watched as Lyra inputted a series of commands into the control panel. He could feel the ship slowing, coming to a near stop as they hovered near the asteroid field's edge. A soft beeping sound echoed through the cockpit as Lyra waited for a response. For a few long moments, there was nothing. Then, a faint signal flickered on the screen, a series of coordinates, and a message in a code Merrick couldn't read. Lyra's fingers flew over the controls, confirming the signal. "They're opening the entrance," she said. "Get ready." Merrick felt his pulse quicken as he braced himself. They were entering unknown territory now, and the consequences of failure were dire. He had no idea what kind of people they would meet, but he had to trust Lyra. For better or worse, they were in this together. The ship maneuvered carefully through the asteroid field, weaving between large rocks and floating debris. It wasn't easy, but Merrick followed Lyra's guidance, his eyes scanning the radar for any signs of danger. After a tense few minutes, they finally reached a small opening in the rock, a hidden base carved into the side of an asteroid. It was a perfect place to hide, and Merrick couldn't help but admire the secrecy of it all. "Welcome to the hidden base," Lyra said quietly. "This is where we'll regroup, rest, and plan our next move." The entrance to the base opened slowly, and the ship flew inside, its engines humming softly as they docked. The large doors closed behind them, sealing them off from the rest of space. Merrick's eyes scanned the dimly lit interior of the base as the ship came to a halt. It was cold and sterile, but it felt safe, at least for now. Lyra stood up from her seat, stretching. "We'll meet with my allies, but we need to be careful. The Empire could send forces here at any moment." Merrick followed her as they exited the ship, stepping into the base's cool, metallic corridors. It was quiet, the only sound their footsteps echoing in the narrow halls. As they walked deeper into the base, Merrick's doubts still clung to him. He wanted to trust Lyra, but the reality of their situation was becoming clearer with every passing second. They had entered a new world, one filled with secrets, lies, and uncertain alliances. And Merrick couldn't help but wonder, was he walking into something far more dangerous than he had ever imagined? The hidden base felt colder than the vacuum of space itself. Merrick followed Lyra through the narrow metallic corridors, the faint hum of machinery echoing through the walls. Every step they took seemed to lead them deeper into the unknown. It was hard to shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. Lyra had said these people were her allies, but how could he be sure? They stopped in front of a large door. Lyra pressed a few buttons, and the door slid open with a hiss. Beyond it lay a spacious room, lit by soft, flickering lights. A group of people stood in the center, their backs to them, discussing something in low voices. Lyra stepped forward, her voice breaking the silence. "We're here." The people turned, their faces hard, but there was a spark of recognition in their eyes as they looked at Lyra. They didn't smile, but their expressions softened slightly. "Lyra," one of them said. The man had dark, intense eyes and wore a patched-up flight suit. He looked older than Lyra, but there was something familiar about him. Merrick couldn't quite place it. "You made it." Lyra nodded. "I had some help," she said, glancing at Merrick. "This is Merrick. He's been with me through everything." The man didn't look at Merrick directly, but nodded slowly. "Good to meet you, Merrick," he said, his voice flat. "I'm Erin. We've been expecting you." Erin turned and signaled for the others to sit down. "We need to talk," he said, his tone serious. Lyra joined him at the table, and Merrick followed, though he felt like an outsider in this room full of people who seemed to know more about what was going on than he did. "I've been in contact with our contacts in the outer systems," Erin said, starting the conversation. "The Empire's forces are stretched thin, but they won't stop. They'll keep searching for us, and now that they know you're alive." "Lyra," he paused, looking at her with a mixture of concern and resolve. "They'll do anything to get you back." Merrick felt the weight of Erin's words. He had heard the stories about the Empire, how they were willing to do whatever it took to crush any resistance. But hearing it from someone like Erin, who clearly knew the Empire's methods, made it real. Lyra wasn't just running from a single enemy. She was running from a system that would stop at nothing to destroy her. Lyra's face hardened. "I didn't come here to hide. I came here to fight. We need to strike back." Erin nodded. "We've been preparing, but we need more resources. We need to get to the outer rim where we can find allies who aren't under the Empire's control. But there's a problem." He paused, and Merrick could see the tension in his posture. "What's the problem?" Merrick asked, his voice low. Erin looked at him, his gaze intense. "The Empire knows about this base. We've received reports. They're sending a fleet to destroy us. If we don't leave soon, we'll be trapped." The words hit Merrick like a blow to the chest. They had only just arrived, and now they were already at risk. He could feel the pressure building, a knot tightening in his stomach. He looked at Lyra, trying to read her reaction. But her face was unreadable, her eyes fixed on Erin as she processed the information. "We need to move fast," Erin continued. "We've got one shot at getting out of here before the Empire closes in. Once they do, we won't be able to escape." Lyra stood up, her expression hardening with determination. "Then we fight. We'll give them a reason to hesitate. We'll show them that we won't be broken." Merrick felt a surge of emotion as he watched Lyra. She was fearless. She wasn't just running anymore. She was taking control, making decisions that could affect everyone in the room. He had seen the strength in her before, but now it was clearer than ever. She wasn't the woman he had first met. She had become something more. "We'll need to divide our forces," Aaron said, pulling out a map and spreading it across the table. "There's a convoy leaving the base in a few hours. If we can catch them before they reach the Empire's fleet, we'll have a chance." Merrick studied the map, his mind working quickly. It was a risky plan, but it was their only chance. He looked up at Lyra. "I'm in. What do you need me to do?" Lyra's gaze softened, but there was no hesitation in her voice. "We'll need you on the front lines. We don't have time to waste. The convoy will be vulnerable without proper protection." Merrick nodded. He wasn't sure if he was ready for what was coming, but he knew there was no turning back now. He had come this far, and there was no way he would let Lyra down. Not after everything they had been through. Aaron gathered the others and began to assign tasks, preparing everyone for the upcoming mission. Lyra and Merrick were assigned to lead one of the smaller squads, tasked with providing cover for the convoy while they made their way to the rendezvous point. As Merrick stood up and prepared to head to the hangar to board one of the ships, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The Empire's fleet was coming for them, and they were running out of time. But there was still something about Lyra that he didn't fully understand. She had been part of something much bigger than he had realized, and even though she trusted Aaron and the others, Merrick couldn't help but wonder if they were all walking into something far more dangerous than they realized. He turned to her, his voice filled with the unease he couldn't shake. "Lyra, what's the real plan? What are we really fighting for?" Lyra met his gaze, her eyes dark and steady. "We're fighting for freedom, Merrick, and for everyone who's ever been crushed under the Empire's boot. But this fight, it's bigger than we think. The Empire isn't just after me. They're after all of us." Merrick didn't fully understand what she meant, but he knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And as he followed Lyra toward the hangar, he prepared himself for the battle ahead, unsure of what the future held but certain of one thing. He wasn't going to let her fight alone.